Okay, everybody. This video is all about the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, RRF. That's where we're at, Restaurant Revitalization Fund. This is a program that was established in ARPA. And so now the SBA has come around, finally finished the guidance on it, and also now opening up the applications for this money. So this video is very urgent and time sensitive because the application portal to apply for this money is first come, first served, and the application portal opens up May 3rd. So I am recording this and posting this to you on April 29th. And what we're trying to do is give you a little bit of time to try to pull together what you need so that if you want to apply for this money, you can go and do it and be the first to apply, okay? So I attended an SBA webinar recently about the RRF, and one of the things that they said is they want you to be on it right when the application opens, okay? So if they're recommending that to me says that this money is going to go very quickly. And the way that it works is you need to get all the way through your application and get into queue in order to get some of this money, okay? So just because you started your application doesn't mean that you're already in queue. You need to complete the application 100%, submit all the required documentation before you're considered in queue for this money. Okay. Now, one of the things to note about this program is that within the first 21 days of applications, they are going to be prioritizing small businesses that are owned by women, veterans, minorities, and those who are economically disadvantaged. Okay. So there is a portion of this program that is trying to target and funnel more money towards those types of business owners. And there's a self-certification portion of the application to say that you are one of those things, okay? So there's some guidelines along that, and we'll get into that. What we're gonna do in this video is we're actually gonna walk through the paper version of this application. What I will say to that is that this is not a paper application in real life. They have put out a draft paper application so that you know what information you need to be gathering and preparing to go and actually apply for this money, but there is an electronic portal, okay? In order to get to that portal when you're ready to apply, and we're gonna get into a couple of the timeline things here in a second, is the website is restaurants.sba.gov. So this program, the RRF, is not like the PPP. So the PPP was a loan that you applied through your bank, and then the SBA funded the loan ultimately, and then you have to apply for forgiveness in order to have it not be a loan anymore and just have it be sort of a grant at the end of the day. The Restaurant Revitalization Fund is not a loan. It is essentially a grant from the beginning, okay? So you don't have to apply for the money and then go and apply for forgiveness down the road, but you do need to use the funds for the correct things. So we are gonna get into that when we get into the application, okay? So the gist of the Restaurant Revitalization Fund is that this is money to help kind of shore up the restaurants who've really been some of the hardest hit entities with all of COVID, okay? So what they're going to do is they're going to provide a grant or this fund in the difference between your 2019 and your 2020 gross receipts, backing out any PPP funds you have already received. All right, so we're gonna talk about who is eligible for this money first. And I'm just gonna read it straight from the SBA website. So eligible entities: restaurants, food stands, food trucks, food carts, caterers, bars, saloons, lounges, taverns, snacks and non-alcoholic beverage bars, bakeries, on-site sales to the public comprise of at least 33% of gross receipts, brew pubs, tasting rooms, tap rooms, again with the gross receipts of 33%, breweries or microbreweries, on-site sales of at least 33%. Those things is that 33% gross receipts is they want to know that you actually have been serving people in person, because if you've been able to totally operate your business just by, selling your stuff to convenience stores or selling your stuff to restaurants, then that's not really the purpose here. Restaurants, they really want to talk about those places that have like a real walk-in experience, because those are the businesses that were the hardest hit, right? And then wineries and distilleries, still with that 33% gross receipts. Inns that have food or beverages on site to the public, and then licensed facilities or premises of a beverage alcohol producer where the public may taste, sample, purchase products. Okay, so really we're talking about real people walking into a place and consuming food. Most of those types of organizations are going to be eligible. Now, some of the places that are not eligible are if you are state or locally owned. So if you are a government operated business and you are a food type business, but you're owned by the government, you cannot apply for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. Additionally, if you have more than 20 locations as a company or as a franchise, you are not eligible for this Restaurant Revitalization Fund. It's really meant to be for smaller businesses. Also, if you have received a Shuttered Venues Operators Grant, then you can't get the RRF as well. And then lastly, if you're publicly traded, you are not allowed to get one of these loans. Okay, so we will see all of these check boxes as we get into the application. We also know that there are some other limitations if you're in bankruptcy or if you have permanently closed, you are also not eligible. If you're in bankruptcy, but you're just reorganizing, you might still be eligible. But if you are in bankruptcy and you're in liquidation, not eligible for the RRF, okay? Permanently closed or in liquidation, not eligible. But if you have been temporarily closed and you plan to reopen, that is still okay. You can still apply for these funds, okay? So what else do we need to know here? Okay, we're going to get into some of the specifics on exactly what you need to compile in order to fill out your application as we go through. And I'm also going to give you some of the tips and tricks that the SBA mentioned on their webinar. But I also wanted to just mention to you, so this is kind of the SBA was saying that what they're going to do is that on this Friday, April 30th, they're going to open up their portal and you'll go to restaurants.sba.gov. They will open up that portal just for you to make a user login, you just register saying that you can apply, okay? So you need to go in, create a registration, username, login, password, all that good stuff. Make sure everything's working properly so that when you get in on Monday, when it's time to actually apply for these loans, you are good to go and you have all of your information. So I would highly recommend taking their advice instead of waiting until Monday, trying to create a user login and then also applying for the loan. I would take their recommendations on Friday, go in, make sure that everything's working properly, that you can get in, that the code that gets sent to your phone number and all of that is working, because you want to test it and make sure you can log into their portal and troubleshoot any issues if there are any issues, so that on Monday you are ready and good to go. All right, so make sure you write down your password or save it in your password manager. Remember, I love LastPass. I think it's fabulous. So you guys, anything like that, just make sure you save your stuff so you can log in on Monday morning. All right, so they said there is that two-stage thing: set up your username and then go in and log in and actually apply later. I think without getting too much into this, I think we should just go ahead and hop into the application and start talking through it. And one of the things I was noticing about the application is sometimes there's a lack of detail. So I'm going to try to point out that whenever I can, especially when it comes to what documentation you need in order to bring to the table so that you can apply for these loans really quickly. So let's go ahead and jump into our screen share. But as we're getting there, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel and liked this video, if you are a restaurant owner and this stuff is helpful to you, please go ahead and do so now. All right, we're gonna go over to the screens. All right, well, here we are in that paper copy of the SBA Form 3172. This is the RRF application, and this is a sample application because, like I said, the actual application is all going to be electronic. And I did want to mention too, they also said that there were a couple of vendors that, like Square, that do have application portals directly with the SBA. So you are able to apply for the RRF directly through Square. And there was one other one that now I cannot find the name of, but, and then there's a couple other vendors. So if you have a electronic payment processor, they might have a report specifically to help you file this application for the RRF. So you might want to check with them. So if you have one of those credit card portals like Clover or Square, please check with them and see if they have any assistance for this process. But if you just use any other type of system, you're going to need to go and pull all this information yourself, potentially work with your CPA or ask your CPA for some of this information if you don't have it on hand. Again, this is extremely time-sensitive information, so we're trying to get this out to you as soon as we can, as soon as we've had this information to be able to explain and walk through for you. Like I said, I went through a webinar, and that was on the 27th of April in order to find out some of this information from the SBA. So it's a very short timeline we're talking about here, which is why this is so urgent that we share it with other people in the community, okay? So this is the paper version of the application. And so what we're going to do is that we're going to walk through the type of information you need to be ready to. So I highly recommend, and I'm going to put a link to this form in the description box of this video, that you download this, print it out, or, fill out a digital copy for yourself, because when you go to actually apply, you want to have this side by side. So it's very easy for you to just transfer all the information from this paper application or, digital paper application into the portal as you go and fill it out. Okay. So you don't need to take time and go and try to find all of this individual stuff. Do that on the weekend as you're preparing to apply for these funds. All right. So let's just get right into it. The funding application, obviously you're going to need your business name and any doing business as name. And make sure that, so it says if you're a sole proprietor, enter your first and last name, okay? Now, these things are very important that you try to match whatever you have with the IRS and whatever matches your tax identification number. That is one of the highest, errors that our systems are getting, is when the EIN or the Social Security number or your taxpayer identification number does not match your name or your business address, okay? So please make sure that you are reading through these and getting the correct address and the correct business name into the application. You can also contact the IRS and get them to do a verification of your EIN if you need that, but you're going to have to be on the phone with them, so try to do this ASAP if you don't have that already. And then you're going to put in your banking information for where you want the funds to be deposited. But one thing I want to note is that they will have the option for you to directly connect to a bank. So if you are with a larger bank or, just a regional bank or something like that, they do have the option to use a Plaid connection. That's where you actually enter your credentials of your account into the SBA. So just be aware that is an option. It is safe. Plaid is a very safe, secure way to connect the SBA to your checking account. And they said that this is one of the most common places that that applications get stuck, because there's so many numbers here. Oftentimes people transpose numbers or put in an extra zero, and basically account numbers or routing numbers are incorrect, and so it kicks their application out and has to be tracked down to fix an error. So using the Plaid connection will eliminate that potential for error. So you don't have to use it. You don't have to use the Plaid connection if you really just don't trust it. But I would say it is a very trusted source and a very trusted way to go and check your bank credentials. So I would highly recommend using it. If you really don't want to, you can type in your routing number and account number. Just, triple check, make sure you are not missing any numbers there and you're getting the right numbers. Okay. Now we're going to get into applicant ownership. You can list as many owners as you want to, up to 20, but you only have to list up to 20% of the ownership of the applicant. So if you have one owner who is a 40% owner, or one owner that's a 50% owner, for example, you can just put the one owner. You don't have to put each and every one. Okay, I thought that was kind of a good tip to maybe help save some time on the application. Another thing they're going to ask you is your organization form type. So please make sure you click the right thing here. This is actually going to be, how are you legally formed? Okay, because if you're an LLC in a state, you might still be taxed as a sole proprietor, but if you are legally formed as an LLC, you need to click LLC here. Please make sure you have this section correct, because it does have implications in the application down the road. Okay. All right, so now we get into a couple eligibility questions. These are a few things that I mentioned earlier in the video. So if you're a state and local operated or state or local government operated business, you are not eligible. If you have more than 20 locations, you are not eligible. If you had a pending application with a shuttered venue operators grant, you are not eligible. And if you're publicly traded, you are not eligible. And then you can go and say which of these types we mentioned, who is eligible. You can go ahead and click which one you would identify as. And then this is where we get into that closed or not closed, bankruptcy, not bankruptcy. So are you permanently closed? If you are permanently closed, you are not eligible. And are you currently in bankruptcy? If the answer is yes, and you are under a reorg, you are eligible. If the answer is yes, and you have no plans to reorganize, then you are not eligible. And then if you're a Chapter 7 bankruptcy and you're undergoing a liquidating Chapter 11 or permanently closed, you are not eligible. All right, so we kind of mentioned that earlier in the video as well. But that you will have to kind of certify to those things. All right, and and this is where they talk about the PPP loans now. So they want to know how much you got for the first draw and potentially second draw PPP loan. All right, so this is key. You want to have this information ready because they need to know how much you received, and also they want your SBA loan number. Okay. And then this is important. If you returned any money before the May 18th safe harbor date, then you don't have to include that amount. And they also would like to know if you have any affiliates, and then if you are a franchise, if you're listed in the SBA's franchise directory. There will be also a search function of the SBA's franchise directory they mentioned in the video or the webinar that I attended. So just FYI about that. Okay, and then they kind of want to know if you've been involved in any illegal activity. When did you first begin making sales? All right, and now we get into really proving out the numbers. So there's a set of tables. You do not have to fill in all the tables. You will see which table applies to you. So table 1 is basically what most people will be using. This is the calculation of the funding amount for applicants that were in operations prior to January 1, 2019. So this means if you were in operations for all of the full year of January 19 compared to 2020. And then table 2 is if you began business in 2019. So you kind of end up sort of creating an annualized 2019 number in order to make your calculation. And then table 3 is if you had not yet operated in 2019, but you did operate in 2020, there's a way for you to do this calculation as well. Okay, so the guidelines get stricter get more complicated as you get into, the newer the business is. And then they're saying you can be aggregated. So if you're filling this out maybe you have multiple locations, you might have a location that started before 2019, and then you might have a location that, started during 2019. You might have a location that started in January of 2020. So in that case, you would aggregate all of these amounts and come up with your total amount of funding request. So let's go back and look at these tables one by one. This is where it gets a little complicated, so I do want you to make sure that you read through each one of these tables and really try to understand what we're asking here, or what the SBA is asking for here. So they're talking about gross receipts, because remember, the way that this is going to be calculated is we're going to take gross receipts from 2019, gross receipts from 2020, calculate the difference, and then that's what you can get for your funding amount. But we also need to take into account any PPP loans, okay? And when I say gross receipts, what we mean is the money that's taken in from sales before any expenses are taken out, before you buy the food, before you pay for labor, before anything else, okay? So this gross receipts number can be found on a tax return, and that's what it's asking for right here. So hopefully you filed your 2019 federal tax return, and you would just pull that gross receipts number and plop it right here. All right, and then they're not saying that you have to be done with your 2020 taxes, because it says gross receipts that are reported or to be reported on your 2020 federal tax return. So hopefully you have a good idea of what you earned in 2020, and you can put that number here. And then let's see, you do not include any of the federal stimulus items like the PPP loan. You don't include the EIDL or EIDL advance or anything like that, okay? And then in this section number 3 down here, this is where you include those PPP loan amounts. So let's just fill this in for the purposes of doing a little bit of math here. So let's just say you got $1 million here, you got 500 1,000 here, and then let's say you got 2 PPP loans totaling 200,000. And so we will add line 2 and 3 together, which would be 700. And then we're going to take 1 million minus 700,000, and that will give us basically a RRF funding amount of 300,000. Okay. And then enter the total number of locations operated by the applicant. And we're going to say that this is just one. And then we have a total maximum of 5 million. And then we're going to take the lesser of line 5 or line 7. All right, which obviously we know what that is. All right, so even if you had multiple locations, let's say you had 10 locations and you needed a $5 million loan at each location, you can only get a maximum of up to $10 million for all of your affiliates combined. Okay, so again, this is really not meant to help the very largest of the businesses. We are really looking at trying to help the smaller businesses and the smaller franchises here. So total for any business and all its affiliates can be up to $10 million. Okay. So you might potentially have like maybe a flagship store that gets a full 10 million, and then you might have multiple other locations that could potentially, your flagship store could potentially get somewhere around 5 million, but then your other affiliates could get, 500,000, 500,000, 500,000 to round out a total of 10 million. And that's the max for any company and its affiliates. Okay, so here is the table 2 calculation. This is where we get into 2019 gross receipts again as reported, and then you would basically sort of annualize those gross receipts. So you would say, let's say that you were open for 6 months and you had a total of 600,000. Then you would say enter the total number of months you were in operations. Okay, 6 months. And then you would divide line. Okay, so our average gross receipts, we divide line 1A by 1B. This is our gross receipts. And then, so this kind of annualizes out my income to be 1.2 million. Okay, and then let's just say our gross receipts in 2020 were 500,000, and we're going to use just the same scenario that we had before. Okay, and so in this situation, we would take 1.2 minus the 7, and this would give us a funding amount of 500,000. All right, so it really matters more when did you actually start your business, if you have a full year of 2019 or not. That determines, what you do there. And then essentially this bottom section is the same as above as well. Okay, so let's say that you started your business in 2020. So if that's the case, or you may have not even had any gross receipts, but you had some eligible expenses. So let's say you had eligible expenses in 2020 of 100,000. Okay, so this one is a little bit different because we're not comparing gross receipts to gross receipts. What we're going to do here is we're going to say, they're saying if you had eligible expenses, because it's expensive to start a restaurant, right? You might have been building out a space. You might have been training your staff. You might have been, testing menus and whatnot, and, working on all of the pre-work to get a business up and running. And you might have not actually had any receipts yet from the preparation of your business. They're saying you can still apply for this money. So what they want you to do is they're going to say, take all of your eligible expenses between January 1 and March 10th, put them in here, and then tell us what your gross receipts were during that time. Okay, so maybe it was, let's just say 0. I mean, it could totally be 0. And then let's say you got a PPP loan of $50,000. I'm not exactly sure how you would have qualified for a $50,000 loan, but I guess if you were maybe potentially getting an outside investment and you had payroll costs, you were able to get a PPP loan. Okay, so let's say your total was 50,000. So then your total eligible expenses minus your PPP loan that you already got covered, you could potentially get, or the answer is 50,000. And then you can, multiply it times the number, then you max out. just like we did before. Okay, so in this situation, this business would be able to get $50,000 in RRF. Okay, so I was doing this on a, assuming that each one of these is just its own individual business. But if this was 3 different businesses all associated together, then you would add each one of these together and put in your total down here. But you're only using table 4 if you've got multiple applicants. Okay, well, I say that wrong. You're using table 4 for all of them, but you're not necessarily going to have a value in table 1, 2, and 3 unless you have multiple locations. All right. And you have to put your total number of locations there as well. All right. So how can you use the money? Once you get the money, it does need to be used for eligible purposes. But if you are operating a business, you're going to have no problem using this money for the intended purposes, because listen to what you can spend it on. Payroll cost. Well, that's one of your business biggest expenses as a restaurant, right? Business rent, mortgage, debt servicing, business utilities, food and beverage expenses. This is including raw materials. I mean, this is basically everything you need to run a restaurant or a food business. Business maintenance expenses, construction of outdoor seating, business supplies, covered supplier costs, and business operating expenses. Guys, so this is pretty much almost every single thing you could be spending money on in your business. You can use this RRF for. It's much less restrictive than the rules around PPP. All right. So please also note that there is going to be this, like I mentioned, priority for women, veteran, and socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. They're going to be prioritized first in getting these loans. But, please make sure that you fill that out, and you also self-certify to being one of those if you are. Okay, and then when you get through the portal, whenever it's time to actually apply for this loan, what you're going to have to do is they will have an actual DocuSign to go ahead and submit your application, and you're also going to have to fill out a Form 4506T, which is allowing the IRS to pull your tax information. And you're going to have to actually sign something, saying that all this stuff is true and correct. So there will be a DocuSign portion of the actual application. So if you get through the portal and you are not actually signing some documents, you are not done yet. So please just be aware of that. And you are also going to have to upload documentation, okay? Any of the following documentation demonstrating gross receipts. Applicants that were in the operations prior to January 1 must supply documentation of gross receipts for 2019 and 2020. The easiest thing to do there is if you have tax returns for both years. If you don't, you could probably provide financial statements, but you do want to make sure you are pulling all this stuff together. And then if you began partially in 2019, you will again have to prove documentation of 2019 and 2020 gross receipts. Also, just a couple other documentation points that you are going to potentially need to provide. Business tax returns. If you are a sole proprietor and you file a Schedule C or you file a Schedule F, you'll need to provide one of those. For partnerships, it's the Form 1065, including your K-1s. Bank statements. The SBA webinar did potentially say that they were going to require 3 months of bank statements. Now, my assumption is that might mean 3 months of bank statements for 2019 and 2020. But what they want to see is they want to see the operating account so they can see that your business was operating in a manner that a restaurant or a food business would be operating. Okay, so you don't want to give them a savings account. You need to give them your main business operating account. They also said that there is a file size limit up to 35 megabytes. Is that what that stands for? 35. So, and most PDFs are going to be underneath that. But if you have maybe 100-page tax return or something like that, you might need to break it down into smaller chunks in order to upload it and not get any errors with their system. Okay. So please keep that in mind. And externally or internally prepared financial statements such as an income statement or P&L, and also potentially any point of sale reports, including IRS Form 1099-K. So if you have something like that, also if you are working with one of those point of sale vendors like Clover or Square, they might have that that report ready for you to just download really quickly. So please check with them and see if they have a restaurant revitalization funding report. All right. Make sure you read these 2 sections as well if either of these apply to you, because there's some additional documentation you need to provide. Self-certification, you will need to go through all of these and make sure that you can honestly sign and certify to each one of these. Remember, you are asking for a large grant from the government. And if you have not certified in good faith, or you have found to have lied about this application, there is potential jail time for you. So please read through these and make sure that you are doing the right thing here. Okay. There's always demographic information that will be available to fill out. You do not have to fill it out if you do not feel comfortable or do not want to. And then you can go and read the rest of this application. Here are just additional instructions, and also just some additional notes about documentation and things you might want to be aware of, specifically around this priority rewarding, what makes a small business concerned by a veteran, what makes a small business concern owned by a woman, etc. Okay, so if you need more information about that. All right, well, that is pretty much the application as it has been described to me. So I hope that is super helpful to you. This is, what we know as of now. Please be ready when it is time to apply for this money, because it will go quickly. I guarantee that. I can't imagine it will last very long at all. Okay, you guys, I hope that was really, really helpful to you. I want you to be prepared, be ready, have all of your documentation gathered and ready to go, so that when you log on Monday morning, remember that the timestamp on that on Monday, May 3rd, opens up at 12 Eastern, 9 Pacific, and that's 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern, okay? This money is first serve. It is okay if you are sitting there waiting online, waiting to put all your stuff together right as the minute turns, okay? That's okay. That's what they actually want you to do, okay? So just be ready and know that if you get through the process, you are in queue to be potentially approved for this money, all right? So get all of your stuff together, and don't be waiting for anything from your CPA or anything like that. Please use the weekend to get all of your documentation together, all right? Well, thanks again for watching. If you didn't already, click the like button and you're here. Would you mind doing that for me? Because if you made it all the way through this video, my feeling is you might have benefited from the information that we talked about today. So really appreciate it. And if you have any other restaurant buddies or groups, feel free to share this video, because this is urgent messages, okay? This is going to be irrelevant once this money is gone. So please share this information. Let's make sure that all these restaurants that really need this money have equal opportunity to go out and get these funds. All right. Thanks so much, you guys. Bye.